Hello, dear listeners, and you have gathered here to listen to me tell a story. So, without any further ado, be prepared to be entertained. Okay, so this story happened at an airport in Russia as I was about to fly to Kazakhstan. I thought it was going to be just a simple trip, but listen and find out what actually happened. Okay, so it's a story of passport control, where things do not go quite right. Let me begin. It was late Monday evening as I arrived in the Samara airport in southern Russia. The place was small and clean, almost exclusively serving domestic flights, with a few key exceptions to former Soviet countries, such as the one I was about to board. Although it was not a particularly hot day out, I was still sweating profusely as I stood in the check-in line. The total baggage allowance was just 10 kilograms, so 22 pounds, and since I was carrying basically everything I owned, which is by no means a lot, but it still included an extra pair of running shoes, a laptop, and a really cool rock I found, so all those kind of weighed a little over the 10 kilograms. So nonetheless, I had to work a little magic to make the limit. In other words, I was wearing 4 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and I had a jacket on that was unzipped because, it was really hot. Okay. So anyway, I was also a slight bit concerned that there could be some complications due to the fact that Kazakhstan, my destination, had only just let Americans enter their country without visas the past year. But anyway, I'd come this far, so what's the use in worrying now? Slowly but steadily, the line slinked forward until finally I was now as wet as a golden retriever that ran through a swamp and probably smelled similarly too. And I reached the check-in line. The lady at the counter seemed a bit shocked by my appearance, but to her credit, she kept her composure and calmly asked me to weigh my bag. Obediently, I did as told, and to my delight, the scale read 9.3 kilograms. Success. So anyway, boarding pass in hand, I headed off to passport control, thinking it was all smooth sailing from here on out. How foolish of me. Smiling, I handed the lady at passport control my passport and my boarding pass. But she stared for the longest time, her face transfixed in a scowl. Suddenly, I felt a cold chill run down my spine, and all that sweating instantly stopped. Something didn't feel right. She leaned forward and began asking me questions. Why are you in Russia? Well, I work here as an English teacher. What's your office? What's their address? What's your boss's name? What's their phone number? This was getting a bit weird. I had flown in and out of Russia at least 20 times by now, and had never gotten any questioning beyond, why are you in Russia? Regardless, I answered her questions, hoping that this would be the end of it. It wasn't. She paused, took out a magnifying glass, and began scanning over each page. I began to sweat again in full force. Repeatedly, she looked up at me in an increasingly uncomfortable manner, and meanwhile, all of a sudden, I started getting thoughts about being detained, her running through my head. And then, to my ever-growing horror, she picked up a phone and began to dial. Is everything all right? I asked. She looked back at me with a piercing stare and held my passport. I don't believe this is you, she coldly replied. I tried to keep my calm demeanor, but inside I was screaming in terror, reminiscent of Nicolas Cage's infamous "Not the bees" yell. Less than a minute later, a police officer arrived, again in my head, "Not the bees! Not the bees!" I yelled that internally to myself, all the while trying to keep my composure. For example, I could show you what I look like. I haven't learned the video feature yet where I could pop up pictures on the side of me talking, so I took screenshots to show you. Thank you for your patience. So yeah, this is what I probably looked like. Hopefully you can see it. And this is what I felt like internally. If you can't see the pictures, just scroll down there in the story. So anyway, as I was looking like that and feeling like I'm about to explode inside, I started getting images in my head of one of those 1950s era propaganda films, except instead of like the clean-cut, ultra-conservative-looking American fighting the Russians, it was just me standing in passport control, a hairy, sweaty dude built like an orangutan, not necessarily the classic 50s story character. But anyway, I was wondering, it's been 2 years without an incident. Everything had gone fine in my time in the country. How does this happen now? How does it end like this when I'm just traveling for a simple vacation? Anyway, about a minute later, a police officer was at the booth. He looked young, probably late 20s, wore an expression as if to say, I'm terribly bored with my job, which I couldn't tell at that point if that was good news or bad news for me. Nonetheless, he was there, that was his demeanor. My mind was racing through every possible scenario. What was he going to say? What was he going to do? What kind of insanity was about to go down? Well, as it turns out, it was actually none of that. Let me explain. He took one quick glance at my passport, and then back up at me. It's real, he said very nonchalantly, as if he guessed this a lot. The lady seemed furious. It's definitely him. Let him go, he concluded, trying to get the whole thing over with. Could this be all? The most anticlimactic ending to the most terrifying airport ordeal, excluding all of mine at JFK, ends with reassurance from a chill security guard? Angrily, the lady stamped my passport and let me through, clearly upset that her power trip fell short. Quickly, I grabbed my passport and ran towards the gate, making sure to get all the way in case she decided to call me back for further questioning. But thankfully, though, no such thing happened, and soon I was off to Central Asia, relaxing in my seat with a huge smile of relief. And that, my friends, is the end for now. Have a good night or morning. I have no idea what time I will watch this, but either way, thank you for listening. Goodbye. Now. Okay, now I found the exit. Alright, goodbye.